Stetson. I work for MIG. We are a consulting firm that has been retained by the city of Azusa to help update the housing element. This project got underway officially, I think, yesterday afternoon when we had a community workshop, and really gets underway this evening with the first Housing Element Advisory Committee meeting. The agenda for this evening, we'll go over in just a minute, but I'd like to turn the meeting over to Manny Munoz of the city to have some opening remarks and to welcome everybody. And then also he will be taking care of some committee business before we get the project underway tonight. Manny?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Manny Munoz. I'm the planning manager here in the city of Azusa. This is our first advisory committee for the housing element. This is an important document for the city and also the region in which we are required to project and how the city is going to grow. So we want to make sure we make right choices in how we're growing as a community. So thank you all for the participation this evening.
In addition to myself this evening helping with the meeting and Manny, we have Dean Flores, who is with the city, and also Matt Marquez, who is the Director of Economic and Community Development. And then working behind the scenes doing magic to keep this show going is Joey Nielsen from MIG. And Joey, thank you very much for helping out this evening. Tonight, we are asking the committee at your first meeting to nominate a chairperson, and Manny will lead you through that. And then once we get that underway, with both the committee and the members of the public who are participating this evening, we'll talk about just some quick protocols for the meeting, but then get into the meat of the meeting to give an overview of the housing element, the timeline, and also a summary from yesterday afternoon's workshop. We will spend a good part of the meeting discussing your thoughts about key housing issues in Azusa, how the city can best address those needs. But we also want to pick your brains on making sure that we can reach much deeper into the community and get some ideas from you of organizations that city staff can visit as part of monthly meetings, and organizations that we ask you to reach out to help take the survey that is currently live on the city's website. Because this is a public meeting, at the very end of the meeting, after the committee's discussion, we will open the workshop up for public comment. And if the public could be very patient this evening and wait until the end to raise your hands, but certainly take notes, because we're going to give the committee the opportunity first to discuss some of these key issues in Azusa. Let me jump ahead real quickly for just a sec here. Manny, do you want to go ahead and go through the operations to get the committee underway and nominate the chairperson so he or she can lead that portion of the meeting?
Yeah, so first I'll take the official roll call of the Housing Element Advisory Committee. Andrew N. Mendez from the Azusa City Council.
Here.
Mercedes Castro from the Azusa Planning Commission. Mercedes, you're muted.
Here.
All right, thank you. Christelle Hutchinson from the Azusa Senior Advisory Committee. I don't think I see her. All right, Steve Castro from the Azusa Chamber of Commerce.
Present.
Thank you. Latasha Jamel from the Azusa Unified School District does have an excused absence. And last, Maureen Taylor is from Azusa Pacific University. Just emailed me. She had a family emergency, so she was unable to attend, but she did attend yesterday's community workshop. And also Mercedes Castro will be providing some input from Azusa Pacific University. So the first is we'd like to nominate a chair and a vice chair. This is the first meeting that we're going to be having for the advisory committee. We do plan on having a second advisory committee meeting later. So we open the floor for nomination of chair, and at that point, the chair will kind of take over the meeting along with Laura as far as getting information out.
Manny, I would like to nominate Mercedes Castro for chair.
I second the nomination.
Oh, brother.
Anyone else have any other objections? If not, it's unanimous. Congratulations, Ms. Castro, on being chair.
No,
nomination for vice chair. Anyone else?
Andrew Mendez.
Open my little drawer. Yeah, you got it.
I second that nomination.
Mr. Mendez, do you object?
I do not. I accept. Thank you. Thank you, Mercedes.
Okay. All right, congrats.
Great, thank you, Mercedes.
Mhm.
I want to also note, if I could, Manny, that I believe Crystal was at the meeting yesterday as well.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, and so much of the information, in fact, 90% of the information that we're going to be presenting this evening is a repeat from last night. So for those of you who, or yesterday afternoon, for those of you who did sit in on that workshop, we're asking you to please build on the comments from yesterday afternoon. We look forward to that. We're going to be highlighting what some of the key takeaways were from yesterday. And we had a couple of areas that we didn't have too much time to discuss. And so I'd like to focus on some of those. But certainly when members of the public who were not there yesterday will have the opportunity at the end of this meeting to review what their fellow neighbors said last night, what the committee says this evening, and their own ideas as well. So as I said, that'll be public comment at the end of the meeting. Mercedes, with your permission, I'd like to go ahead with the presentation. And,
Please do.
Thank you. Sec here. Before we get underway on the details of the housing element, I'd like to point out that this is a plan for the next 8 years for housing in Azusa and meeting the community's housing needs. This is something that every community in California, be it a city, a town, or a county, is required to do on a every 8-year basis, is to look deeply into what the community's housing needs are and put forward programs and implementation strategies for meeting those needs. So the key goal of the housing element is both to help the public understand what the community's housing needs are. As part of this process, we certainly want to gather ideas from everybody in the community, because this is your town, Azusa is your town. And so this is a document that reflects the needs of the people who live here, own businesses here, and work here. I want to provide you first with a short video that explains the housing element and the requirements of what goes into a housing element and why the city is undertaking this process. So I'm going to switch screens here just a minute. Let's get this underway, and there'll be about a 3-minute video. And for people who may be hard of hearing, we do have subtitles that go with the video. So just a moment here.
Laura, I don't think there's audio.
Okay, let me back up for just a sec and see if we can get that squared away.
It's on mute.
Yeah, I think it's a share screen function for it. So just a sec here. As I said, technology does happen. Let's see here. Joey, on share screen, it should indicate, right? That, just a moment here.
You may have to reshare your screen and make sure the audio settings are enabled.
Got it, will do. New share. Share sound, got it. Thank you everyone for your patience. I think we got it now.
The city of Azusa is one of the best places in California to live, work, and play. And as the demand to live in our city grows, it's time for us to have a conversation about housing. California law requires all cities and counties to have a plan for how they will meet the housing needs of everyone in the community, no matter their income level. That's why we've launched the Azusa Housing for All initiative, a clear plan and a dynamic framework for how we will meet our housing needs together as a community. When the state's 8-year population forecast gets revised, cities like Azusa need to update their housing plans to address these new projections. Now, some of you are probably thinking, what if we don't want to build more housing in Azusa? That's an understandable response. But before reacting, let's break it down, because there's actually a lot of reasons why it's important to meet our community's housing needs. Because of the high cost of housing, it can be challenging for cities in the San Gabriel Valley, like Azusa, to provide enough affordable housing for groups like seniors, families, and young professionals. Lack of affordable housing makes it more difficult for children that grow up in Azusa to stay in Azusa as adults. More importantly, lack of affordable housing can also lead to overcrowding, increased homelessness, impacts to healthcare, and increased costs to the community. Having housing options for all not only helps fulfill Azusa's housing plan, but ensures high quality of life for all our residents in the future. So, what happens if we don't get a new housing plan approved? Well, the city could be fined, lose state funding opportunities, lose the ability to issue permits, and in the end, not have a say in where new housing should go. So how many new homes are needed? Based on the state's forecast and the local housing formula, Azusa must plan to add 2,651 new housing units by October 2029. And of those 2,651 units, 1,128 need to be affordable to low and very low income households. The updated housing plan must show the exact location where future housing can be built and how many homes can be built at each location. But how do we decide where new housing should go? And what are considered good places for new homes? Here are a few appropriate locations where housing or density can be added to meet our community's needs. Vacant lots that have not been set aside for open space. Sites that are either underutilized or in need of rehabilitation. Locations where housing could become denser than it currently is. Areas near public transportation and essential services like healthcare, police, fire, and retail centers. And places where housing could be added to retail spaces or business parks, creating new live-work neighborhoods. Some cities, including Azusa, may also encourage homeowners to build mother-in-law quarters on their properties. These are called accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. But before we decide what goes where, we need your help. We want to know what's most important to you when thinking about where new housing should be located. This is an opportunity to move Azusa forward and work together to make sure the Housing for All initiative is a success. The decisions we make in the coming months will shape our community for years to come. So let's do the best thing for our city and make them together.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for bearing through those just short difficulties at the beginning. Before we get into the meat of the meeting, I just wanted to make sure that everybody remembers how to use Zoom, that if you are not speaking, please mute yourself on the far button. And as I requested, if you would like to be on video, you can hit the video button that is just to the right of the mute. You can see who's on the meeting by looking at the participant screen. If you are more comfortable offering comments via the chat function rather than raising your hand and speaking, you can do that. And because we do have a smaller crowd this evening, we are not asking people to wait for us to unmute you if you want to speak. We're allowing you to go ahead and unmute yourself when the time comes. And when we're into our committee discussion, maybe all the committee members can keep their microphones on. That would be great. That will move us along this evening. Just meeting niceties, one person speaks at a time, and try to keep your comments as short as possible. Respect others' opinions. We have a lot of ideas and thoughts about housing, and not all of them might align. And so recognize that there are a lot of different ideas that might be expressed this self. As I've mentioned, if you can mute yourself when you're not speaking, unless we've got the committee having its meeting. And remember, this is just one step in a process that started yesterday. There will be additional, at least one additional committee meeting, and there will be community workshops. And we're going to talk to you this evening also about the survey that's up and running. The housing element, as I mentioned, is something that every community in California is required to have. As the video showed, it has to be updated every 8 years. And for Azusa, which is part of a very large Southern California region, all of the cities and counties in Southern California, with the exception of San Diego County, which is doing this right now, has an adoption deadline of October of this year. And so all of the work that we're doing now will work towards adoption by the City Council by October 15th of this year. The reason cities are required to do this housing plan is not just because there are immediate local needs, but the legislature many years ago indicated that this is an issue of vital statewide importance, because having a plan helps improve and develop housing for everybody in the community, people of all economic segments. So this is something that provides housing for people who may be a very lower income to people who are quite comfortable in their means. The housing element has 5 pieces to it, or 5 chapters, if you will, including a really deep dive on what are the needs in the community. What's the demographic makeup of Azusa? How do people sort out from an economic standpoint, and what are their various housing needs? What are the constraints to new development on housing? I think you've seen that in Azusa that there have been quite a few new projects going up right now, including right across from City Hall, but there may be constraints that are keeping others from building housing in the community, maybe due to zoning regulations, maybe properties are environmentally challenged, maybe the market conditions aren't quite right, or maybe there isn't the proper infrastructure for housing in a particular area. We will use all of that information and also look at what are the resources available, both from a financial standpoint and a land inventory. I think people will look around Azusa and say, gosh, you know, there really isn't that much vacant land available. How can we produce roughly 2,600 new homes for Azusans if there isn't vacant land? Well, I think as we'll go through this, you'll see that there are really creative ways for housing to be developed in the community. A quick snapshot of Azusa shows that the community is pretty much equally divided between those who own their own homes and people who rent. And it's important to make sure that certainly that people who want to live here but cannot afford a home currently have plenty of opportunities. But importantly, people who are looking to make a long-lasting investment in the community can buy homes as well. And so even though you've kind of got this equal split right now, the city's goal may be to encourage more home ownership opportunities. We don't know yet. That's part of the conversation that we want to have with you and with the broader community. A big question that comes up when we're putting together a housing plan is, you know, we talk a lot about affordable housing, but what does it mean? Does it vary from, say, what's affordable in a community like Los Angeles or downtown Los Angeles versus El Monte or Azusa? Affordable housing, using requirements or really standards that the federal government sets, says that if housing is affordable, it means that a household, everybody in the household, not just one person, but whomever is contributing to that whole household, if combined, the people who are living there are paying no more than 30% of their annual income on either their mortgage or their rent. And if you're paying more than that, that means that there really isn't as much money available to that household to spend on things like medical care or education or any other special needs that that household might have. And so a household that is paying more than 30% of that monthly income is termed to be cost burdened. And we might come back to that term in just a minute. And so we have looked at the data in Azusa and have determined and identified that 44% of all households in Azusa experience housing cost burden. That's a pretty high number. But among lower income households, the percentage is even higher at 68%.
Laura, a question on this?
Beg your pardon?
Is this before or after taxes?
That's a great question. I think it's gross income, not net income.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I can't see who's asking the question as I'm going through the presentation. I don't have that many screens open. So I will get out of the presentation when we're in the discussion so I can see who is asking the question. So let's take an example of what is considered affordable for, let's say, a 4-person household that's earning $90,000, roughly $90,000 a year. That is considered, from the county median income standpoint, a low-income household. And so that household, if we were to use this metric of 30% of the household income, that household, if it's paying more than roughly $2,200 a month for housing, would be considered a cost-burdened household. So those, I think the takeaway that we can see from this graphic is that people might have a preconception of what low income means, but it really, in LA County, just because of the cost of housing, the definitions are pretty astounding. In Azusa, the average monthly rent or median rent for a 2-bedroom household as of earlier this year was about $1,900. And the average mortgage payment is just over $2,000. So what this chart shows you is that there are many professions that, if they are the only wage earner in that household, would not be able to afford even the median rent in Azusa. So for example, an elementary school teacher, if he or she were the only household earner, would not be able to afford that rent and would likely be doubling up with somebody in order to afford that. So largely people at the higher end of the income spectrum, or folks who have either a post-secondary degree of a bachelor's or master's or higher, would be able to earn enough to make those average costs of housing in the community. I'm going to switch now and talk a little bit about this number that was raised in the video of 2,651 units that Azusa is looking to provide capacity for over the next 8 years. And I'm going to use an acronym, which is just kind of a funny acronym. I try not to use any other ones tonight, but it's the RHNA, what we term the RHNA, or the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. Every community in California is given a target for providing new housing over these 8-year planning terms. And this is a process that starts at the state level. The state is assessing what the statewide needs are for housing. And that is then divided down to different regions of the state. Azusa is part of something called the Southern California Association of Governments region, which is all Southern California communities or counties except San Diego. And about 1.5 years ago, the Southern California region was assigned a target of 1.3 million homes over the next 8 years. 2/3 of those are really just to catch up with housing production that has not occurred over the last 8, 12, 15 years. That Southern California has been lagging in providing housing to meet the growing needs. So 2/3 of that 1.3 million is catch up. The other 1/3 is anticipating what the need would be for new people coming to California and just growth in the region. So of those 1.3 million units, 2,600 have been assigned to Azusa to plan for 2,600 units. Those units are divided up among different categories of income for households. And so about just over 1/3 of those would be for households that are considered lower income, earning with less than 80% of the average median income for the county of Los Angeles. 14% for people who would be considered relatively middle income, and then 43% for higher market rate units. So this is recognizing that there is certainly a continuing demand and need for market rate units, but certainly there continues to be a demand for lower income units in the community. This last point that I want to make, it's at the very bottom of the slide here, is the city's obligation is to provide capacity for the housing units, meaning that properties need to be zoned to accommodate that. This is not a construction obligation. The city is not in the business of building housing. And so you're not penalized if 8 years from now, those units are not built. The city's only obligation is to provide that capacity, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Just for point of comparison, you might want to know, well, what's the obligation of Azusa's neighbors? And does this RHNA obligation correlate in any manner to the city's size in terms of how many people live here or the number of homes that are here today? And I think this chart shows you that no, there's really not any type of direct correlation. You can see that, for example, Azusa's obligation is higher than that of Baldwin Park. And Baldwin Park has a population that's about a third or more greater than Azusa. Covina, which has a population similar to Azusa's, has a RHNA that's about 700 units fewer. So that you can see that it's a pretty hefty obligation for Azusa to plan for those numbers of units, even though the city has been a really good player in providing housing, both through, for example, the development that Rosedale that occurred on the former Monrovia nursery property, as well as the units that have been built up around the Gold Line station. So you might think, all right, how can the city provide capacity for those number of units when you pretty much don't have many vacant properties left? Well, we can look at projects that are currently in the pipeline and are being built today. We can look at vacant sites. We can look at sites that maybe are not used to their full potential right now. It could be maybe some aging residential properties. It could be some commercial properties on which the property owner might want to transition to residential development. And also what you saw in the video are termed accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. And that's essentially a garage conversion to a second unit on a property. It could be a second unit that's built behind the primary residence. It could be even an accessory dwelling unit attached to somebody's home today. And state law about 2 or 3 years ago really provided a lot more flexibility on how an accessory dwelling unit could be built. And communities throughout California have seen a tremendous uptick in accessory dwelling units. And that's certainly a way to provide affordable housing, because those units typically are a little bit smaller, and in many cases, people do rent them to relatives or to people of more modest means. When we're asking questions also about what does an affordable unit look like, or what does it mean, and generally the more housing units or homes that are built on a property due to economies of scale mean that they could be more affordable. So if you have, say, just one large home on a large lot, that would generally be at the higher income scale. Accessory dwelling unit might be considered, as I mentioned, either a moderate income or lower income. And certain types of multifamily housing could be considered lower income, but density does not necessarily always correlate to affordability, because you might have a more dense, say, condominium or townhouse project that is market rate, and is at a density that might be considered multifamily. Density comes in all types of forms. It really just depends on how big the units, the housing unit is. So for these examples show different projects throughout the San Gabriel Valley. So something that's maybe 3 stories could range, 3 or 4 stories could range from 30 units to 55 units per acre, depending on whether or not they're 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom studio units, or even 3-bedroom units. So density, again, does not always equate to how large a development might be or how many stories it might be. I'm going to take a short breath right there just to let everybody absorb that, because I think there'll probably be a lot of questions about density and where density might go or not go in Azusa as we plan for these homes over time. One other key topic, in addition to accommodating new homes in Azusa, that your housing plan will look at is to see whether or not there is currently any discrimination in the housing market in Azusa. And are there ways, or are there barriers that people are finding to home ownership, not just because of cost, but because of discrimination? And so what are ways that this housing plan might ensure that everybody has equal access to housing? and to make sure that communities are inclusive. And this is something that we're going to be asking to work with the committee with, not at this meeting, but certainly at our next meeting that doesn't have a date scheduled for it yet. The timeline for the housing plan to be adopted, as I mentioned, there is a state requirement that it be adopted by October 15th of this year. And so we are busy reaching out to the public right now, just like the meeting this evening, to get ideas. Throughout the spring, we will be looking at the sites and programs that will be in the housing element to put together a draft by the spring so that we can get feedback from the subcommittee, from the Planning Commission before the draft housing plan goes to the state for review. There is a requirement that before it does get adopted, that it be reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And they will do that this summer before we undertake both the necessary environmental analysis of this document and then move into public hearings in September and October of this year. One of the key ways that we're looking to get input from the community in the Housing for All initiative is through an online survey, which is currently live and will be live through the end of this month. And the survey is available in English, Spanish, and Mandarin for those who would like to take it. In fact, anybody that we encourage to take it, we will provide you with this website address again at the end. Hold on just a sec here. Yes, Joey Nielsen has just posted this in the chat. So if anybody wants to copy the survey web address from the chat, you can put that directly in your browser and it'll take you right to the survey. And it's pretty straightforward, won't take long, but asks a lot of important questions of the community. The workshop that we had yesterday afternoon, which some of you had the opportunity to participate, raised many key themes. We asked questions about what are the challenges in Azusa? What are the opportunities and creative solutions to address those challenges? How can the city put programs together to meet those needs? Where can housing be accommodated? Where's housing, and what types of housing are particularly needed? And some of the key themes that were repeated yesterday were certainly a need for more affordable housing, meaning more affordable in the sense it needs to be more affordable, but also additional housing to meet the needs of lower income residents. There were people indicated that there needs to be some education campaigns so tenants and landlords both know that the housing rules in the community. People said that no matter what the type of housing comes into the community, good design is critical. Azusa has set a high bar for new housing development, and that bar needs to be maintained at a very high level. And just a lot of great conversation yesterday. This digital whiteboard, we'll do one this evening too, captured all of the thoughts and ideas that came from the meeting. And this is available and will be posted on the city's website for people to review. It will be part of a summary that will be included in the housing element as well, so people will know over time what the input was from the community. And there you see a lot of the key themes as we move forward. So tonight, Mercedes, I'm going to turn this back over to you to really encourage the committee members to weigh in on these issues. And then after the committee has had a chance to have its conversation among themselves, to ask the members of the public to weigh in this evening. And so the questions that we're going to be asking you, first questions are, who can we contact to make sure that they take the survey and are aware of the follow-up workshop at the end of this month, where we're going to be talking about the sites inventory and programs. And then also over the next month, who can Manny Munoz and members of his planning staff go talk to? Maybe the Rotary or the Lions or other community groups, PTAs are having Zoom workshops, and Manny and his staff can participate and get the word out. Maybe have 10 or 15 minutes as part of those agendas and help the community understand that we really need this type of input. So we're going to be asking both the committee as well as members of the public to provide that information to us. But similar to yesterday, we'd like to know what the major challenges are issues in Azusa, both today and moving forward? What types of housing are particularly needed? Anywhere from additional accessory dwelling units, maybe smaller units, maybe units to meet the needs of growing families. So we want some particulars on that. And to address this, this challenge, if you will, of 2,651 new homes for new Azusans, where are good places to put that housing? And what are the creative solutions to address not just those needs, but other needs that you see in the community? So don't worry, you don't need to remember exactly what all those are. So, Joey will magically have these on our digital whiteboard, which I will bring up. And can everybody see the whiteboard?
I can. Everybody's muted, so if you're shake your head.
Very good. With that, Mercedes, maybe you and I can both encourage the committee to respond to some of these questions. But the first ones, and actually, if you don't want to go in any particular order, what you might want to do is take turns as committee members talking about these things. Or Mercedes, if you want to instead just to have more of a free-form meeting, I will leave it up to you. You're on the Planning Commission, so you know how these meetings go. But again, major challenges and issues, creative solutions. Where in the community can housing be accommodated? What are the policies? How do we get the word out? And we've got a map down here if anybody wants us to pull up the map so that we can talk about particular areas where housing might be appropriate. And Joey, I am gonna relinquish control of the whiteboard to you at this point in time.
Laura, may I say something here, please? Merce, yes. Manny, I think you ought to reach out to, and I'll give you the contact if you don't have it, but definitely Rotary. They're always looking for stuff like this. And then of course the chamber, we're gonna meet, we have our general board meeting on the 24th of this month. Love to have you join us with all this information.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll reach out for both those two. Yeah.
I'll send you the contact for Ray Kearney, president.
Okay. If I could call you by your first names, if you don't mind. Steve, are there other subgroups of the chamber, or do you think by reaching to the chamber that they'll get the word out to any other groups that they might be members of?
Laura, currently there are no subgroups of the chamber. We're running a skeleton chamber currently, given what has happened. But no, we can, with Manny attending our Zoom meeting, of course, on the 24th, he can get the word out and we'll keep it moving. This is really important. And let me jump ahead here a little bit, Merce. I don't want to step on your toes, but one of the things I've been thinking about after yesterday's meeting is down the road, infrastructure, police department, public safety. We're gonna have a major impact with the numbers of housing units that are coming in. Do the math on how many folks living in each unit. That's above my pay grade, I don't know. But PD is gonna have a big job on their hands once this is built out. Well, even in the process of it being built out. Has anybody given any thought to that, Laura? At state?
Those are very common questions, Steve, that many communities ask. And it's that's something that we'll be looking at in terms of what we call constraints on meeting the needs. You know, are there the resources available to building housing and perhaps not just the public services infrastructure, but physical infrastructure as well. Can the water systems handle it? Can sewer systems handle it? Storm drains, streets. So physical infrastructure as well as social infrastructure, if you will.
And then just to expand a little more, Steve, the Economic and Community Development Department is looking at doing a comprehensive impact fee study, a nexus study, to really look at how our impact fees for new development, you know, making sure we're covering all of our bases as far as public safety. The other thing too is we have a city library that right now we're not collecting anything for them. So being comprehensive in that approach.
Thank you, Manny.
I know I've thought of a couple other organizations you could reach out to, Manny, is the Seroptimist Azusa Glendora. And then the HOAs. I think Rosedale has 4 or 5 HOAs.
Five.
And then of course Mountain Cove has an HOA, and those would be good groups to reach out to too. The survey, I think we just need to share it as much as we can to get it out there to everybody. I know that Jesse's already shared it, as has Andrew and myself. So that's another important thing. But I think our big concern is, where are we going to build these houses? And I know I mentioned yesterday Atlantis Gardens, and Manny, you want to fill them in what you know about Atlantis Gardens?
Yeah, so for those of you that aren't familiar with the property itself, the property is owned by the Los Angeles County. So they have control over as far as ownership goes. We have a couple parcels in there, but the majority is by the county. I know it is on the county supervisor's radar to turn that into affordable housing of a project of some sort. So hopefully with this, highlighting it as an opportunity site in which we can put more pressure on the county to make sure that that property is developed. It's also in our opportunity zone. So there's just a lot of positives in that area in order to develop something comprehensive that's equitable for the community.
That's what I was just going to ask you about, that opportunity zone. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the opportunity zone is kind of a way as far as taxing that if a developer goes in there, they have more leverage to develop the property. So it's another incentive, so to speak, to spur development in that particular area. And that's a prime example because the majority of the enterprise zone, they're all single family homes. And this is kind of the larger lot that will allow for a much larger development.
Several years ago, we had the opportunity to look at some plans for Atlantis Gardens. And I don't remember, I don't know if anybody else does, how many apartments that was going to be. It was going to be very nice. They were going to have an on-site manager. Does anybody remember how many units that was planned for that area?
I don't recall, you know, this was kind of before my time, but I know the project obviously didn't move forward and so forth. But the good thing is that now we do have the TOD specific plan, which is part of that too. So we can also look at a more comprehensive project that can have some on-site amenities for the people that will live there, but also influence the area around there for any future development.
Does any of the committee have any ideas for other land that we could use to build homes? I did suggest yesterday the school sites that have been closed, because I think you get a lot of houses on a school site.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. Mercedes, and I think with declining enrollment, and I believe that we're going to see, to an extent, with declining enrollment, obviously, we've got to play a balancing act, because of course, as we start allowing these new houses, 2,600 houses being built, of course, that's going to come with additional children. So playing that balancing act as to how many people are actually in the schools will be interesting. With that being said, that there are a couple, of course, that have already, Mountain View, for example, of course, would I think be an ideal location. It's very freeway close, and you could build a tremendous, I think, amount of dwellings in that property. If I can go back, Manny, to the Atlantis Gardens, you mentioned that some of them are city owned, some of them are county owned. There's also private owners in that as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple parcels to the site itself that comprise all of Atlantis Garden. I would have to look back and look closer. There are very few, but the majority of the property owner is the county.
Got it. Thank you.
Manny, that was a redevelopment property, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Manny,
which is the reason why the enterprise was kind of ideal, because it still had the same demographics as a redevelopment.
Do we have any other property, city-owned property in Azusa that would be good for housing? I know across the street from La Tolteca, that site, that's city-owned, right?
Yeah, it was purchased, but yeah, there's not much land per se that we have. You know, we're kind of dwindling down to the city-owned properties that we have now. So it's just now getting more creative with redevelopment and infill development, and looking at underutilized properties. The other big thing that the planning division and the planning team is going to look at, to like Mercedes, how you mentioned, as far as putting housing in the right location, is our corridors. Luckily here in the city of Azusa, we have really good corridors that can support higher density. For example, Azusa, Foothill, Gladstone, and Arrow. It's especially Arrow, that's one area that's really underdeveloped on the city side, on the northern side. You know, that we definitely want to look at to be able to provide higher density. And then at that point, you have a nice transition of higher density going into the single family. So making sure that we have housing and we have the right balance, that's what's key. You know, because we still have a mix of housing from single family all the way to multifamily.
And then I think that there's a lot of talk about the ADUs, and I've seen a lot of chatter. I think we really need to publicize that the city is encouraging ADUs. Some of the properties up like Alameda, Saldano, above Foothill, they have large lots. They could easily do an ADU, and it would be beneficial to the homeowner too. Yeah,
that is very true. And, you know, and like always, we're trying to publicize and streamline our process for the ADUs, especially since the state is being more, you know, freeing up the requirements and so forth.
Manny, can I ask a question on that? Someone had shared with me essentially it was a local city, and they had 4 or 5 different pre-approved plans specifically for ADUs. Do we have something like that within the city?
As of right now, no. That would be very specific to, like, let's say a garage, or if they're building a brand new ADU from the ground up to 800 square feet. That would kind of, because you pretty much have 3 ADUs. You convert a garage, or you build one from the ground up, standalone, 800, or you go past the 800 mark and so forth. So we can definitely look at, and this can be also part of our housing policy, that we look at more aggressively, like Mercedes mentioned, at ADUs. And looking at that perspective.
So what do you people feel that major housing issues and challenges are in the city of Azusa, other than the ones that we've mentioned?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and there are a lot of pockets already like this within the city, is there's areas that have a higher density already. And the challenge, of course, becomes parking. And when we're looking at infrastructure, we can't, realistically, it's very difficult to build more parking spaces, especially on a street, unless you're doing dramatic changes to lanes, removing lanes, putting in sideways parking, things of that nature. But parking is going to be a big challenge. And if we're looking at adding ADUs in specific pockets of the city, I think that's going to be an issue where we're already seeing there's limited parking and people are parking a block or 2 away from their house just to go there. I think that would exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. Well, one thing about ADUs that we've noticed here in the city and so forth, and what we kind of try to push along, is specifically with multi-generational households, that the ADUs really come into play in that, where, you know, you have your aging parents that can go into the ADU, and then you have your children in the main house and so forth. And then at that point, it kind of eases the burden, so to speak, on traffic and parking and all that, because you kind of have the same household, so to speak, but you're still kind of divided. We're seeing that trend a lot more with the ADUs versus having developers where they're purchasing property and looking at it as a rental income. So, you know, for something like that, we definitely want to push forward higher density in the right locations by having the corridors and so forth that will accommodate, and we'll have parking requirements, and we'll have everything within those corridors.
So what are our parking requirements right now if I were to build 4 condos?
2-car garage for each unit.
Okay. And is that?
And then after you get in, once you get into the 5th unit, then you have guest parking requirement.
So the key is stay 4 or under.
Yeah, for the most part. But a lot of it too, at the counter, you know, especially when we have developers, I tell them, hey, you know, look at parking as an amenity to your tenants. So when it's time to lease it, you can say, hey, your unit comes with you know, these stalls plus a guest one or something like that. Because like Andrew mentioned, parking is going to be a hot commodity, and a lot of people are going to like that it's going to be more easier for them to rent out and have easier access to the residential unit itself.
I think that's one of the selling points of the Orchard, is that your parking is right across from your apartment.
Yeah.
Mercedes, it's interesting that you've brought that up, and actually everybody's focused on parking. Many times the state identifies exorbitant parking standards as a constraint on housing development just because of the amount of space that it takes up. So I know that's one thing that the state will be focusing on is what are the city's parking requirements? And Manny, has the city reduced parking requirements near the Gold Line station?
Slightly, yes.
Okay.
And
But the flip side of that is everybody does want to be able to park, and it is an amenity in new residential development.
what we're hoping to get is people who just want to ride the train and don't need a parking space along the Gold Line.
I want to come to the question of particular types of new housing. What does the committee feel are housing types that, be it for seniors or young families or 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom? Are there particular things that you think can be done to address specific housing needs and housing types?
That's a good question. Does anybody have any answers? Jesse, you've been pretty quiet.
I do think that, Councilmember Avila, sorry, but I do think that as far as senior facilities, I know that the senior facilities are an absolute hot commodity, and there really is not a lot of them. More particularly, that there's not a lot of them that are a newer development in our area. So I do think that having that as one of our focuses would be beneficial.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it'd be a great addition to our city.
As Mercedes, as you're leading the discussion, I'm also looking at the chat, and Dean from city staff is putting some information in the chat, which I'll go ahead and put on our digital whiteboard here. But I just added transfer of development rights, and that's a technique that's used by some to increase density on one property to protect resources. For example, if it's adjacent to a mountain, or it's a historic preservation site, that you can move density from something you'd like to preserve to a site that might be able to support more housing units.
And then what about underserved spots in the city of Azusa? Can any of you think of places that you would feel are underserved that we could make better use of?
I think that along Foothill Boulevard, we probably have locations that are underutilized, or perhaps there could be some sort of mixed use where you have retail and or commercial on the bottom, and you have some sort of mixed use residential on top of that.
See, I really like mixed use, but my fear is right now, I think it's going to be after the pandemic much harder to get retailers in. So I would hate to see us build a lot of mixed use and not be able to fill them. As soon as the orchard's full, I'm going to be really happy. But I definitely think what was that motel, the Colonial Inn? Now, I don't know what's happened. I know that part of that is gone, correct? And a part of it's been just named as historical. Is that right, Manny?
Yeah, so the house itself is the historic property. The rest of the property was demoed and so forth. So at least it's a cleaner lot for developers to kind of get a visual in what can be in that area. The good thing is that is within our TOD specific plan. So because of the TOD specific plan, it facilitates development for hospitality use, housing, mixed use projects, and so forth. So it's just a matter of finding the right buyer or developer that will develop the property.
Manny brought up a thought to me right now. What about hospitality? What if we put in a hotel? Does that count?
It does not.
Oh,
That's short-term stay. Something else that does not count, and this came up at the discussion yesterday afternoon, is student housing. So any housing that Azusa Pacific builds specifically for students does not count toward the 2651, because that's a very defined population. It's housing that's not open to the entire community.
But the apartments that Azusa, that APU currently owns that house students, those count?
If they are only available to students, no.
Oh.
But if there are apartment complexes that a lot of students live in that is otherwise owned, then yes.
No, I think APU has a couple of buildings that are just students. They use them as dorms, technically like dorm use, you know.
When you said motel, that reminded me also of opportunities that other communities are looking at for conversions of hospitality uses. If there are hotels or motels that could be converted to permanent housing, or even old commercial or office buildings, that something called adaptive reuse is another opportunity. And if you've got an existing building, and I live in Pasadena, and I've been watching this happen, a high-rise office building has been converted to residence, and those count as well. So it's going to be interesting post-pandemic to see what the demand is for the office market, and might there be opportunities to convert office buildings or other types of buildings to residential.
Right, I think you'll see that a lot, like in Pasadena, where you have a lot of retail, but we don't have a lot of retail office space in Azusa, unfortunately.
Yep, that is correct. What about along Azusa Boulevard, the Azusa San Gabriel couplet? There's been a lot of focus over many, many years for reinventing those boulevards, but how does the committee feel about any additional intensity or more residential uses along those roadways?
Laura, are you asking specifically between streets, for example, 5th and Foothill, or the entire corridor?
I'm thinking the entire corridor, all the way down from the freeway up to City Hall.
Well, I would like to see the downtown developed. I'd like to see more housing there, and I would like to see more mixed use. But my fear, as I said, is that for the retail, and we've always talked about developing San Gabriel and Foothill. In fact, I believe some of the occupancy permits are going to be up. I know I fought for the tire and brake place. I think theirs is only a couple more, because there's always been talk about developing that corner. Is that still talk, Manny? Are we still talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is in the specific plan, and I mean, it is a possibility. Also, Azusa Avenue leading into the downtown, which is our Azusa Avenue corridor. That's also a prime location for higher density. We have had inquiries for various parcels on there where they want to go up, and I think that's a good segue leading into the downtown, because you have that market of people that would have housing, and then you have a bustling downtown.
Because we have the old Carmen's building. I mean, it's not ours, but the Carmen's building is empty. That's something that could be redeveloped possibly. There is a lot actually on Azusa Avenue. There's a lot that we could do. And then you know that Massage Envy is no longer in that building.
That's correct.
So that's another area that we could, go down San Gabriel.
We've been talking a lot about sites and where to put housing. Can we maybe talk about what are the housing needs in the community? We mentioned seniors, and that seniors are a hot commodity, I think somebody said, but are there other particular needs that the committee feels are not fully addressed at this point in time? And that could include people who may be transitioning from homelessness and are looking to get back on their feet with some type of transitional or supportive housing. It could be housing for large families. Are there enough opportunities for 3-4 bedroom homes and apartments for larger families? What do you see maybe in your neighborhoods or just in your associations in the community where those housing needs might be.
Only councilmen in large houses. One of our councilmen has several children.
I keep hearing the refrain from the movie, build it and they will come. So people need housing. And I think ultimately, you know, and I'm using a broad brush here, but ultimately, almost regardless of what we build, people who have a need are going to fill it.
So Steve, your point is pretty much all types of housing, given what the demands are throughout the region.
Yes.
Okay.
I defer to the vice chair, who's an expert in real estate.
And large families.
And
Yes,
large families.
right.
He has his own basketball team.
Vice Chair Mendez, you actually bring up a good point as far as families. And, you know, in the video, we did touch on, you know, people that are born in Azusa, grow up in Azusa, that can still stay in Azusa. And I think affordability is a very big factor in that unfortunately is pushing people out of Azusa and pushing them into the more outskirts where affordability is more attainable. So, and how you guys see that from a city perspective and as a planner, we don't have any type of policies that address affordability and making sure that we're creating that pipeline to have more affordable units in the city. You know, right now we have a handful of units, some that are actually expiring this year because of the covenant. You know, most covenants are only 50 years. And after that, they're at risk of going market rate. And if we, you know, out of this current cycle of our housing element, we only got 6 additional housing units that are affordable, which are the senior Gladstone villas, and that's specific to seniors. So we don't have any that are, you know, for young professionals, anyone that are for young families and so forth. And as you saw from the presentation, you know, affordability has a new face. And, you know, someone can be working at Azusa Unified School District as a teacher's aide, and then they can easily qualify, you know, because just, you know, rents are so expensive, everything's just so expensive, you know, and it's a reality. So that's another thing in looking at city policies and how we can address affordability.
Manny, you and Genevieve and Matt haven't talked about this before, but I wanted to let the committee know that there's a concept called inclusionary housing, or inclusionary housing ordinances that a few jurisdictions throughout, well, maybe more than a few throughout the state have in place that require the provision of affordable units as part of a market rate project as well. So if you're building more than, say, 10 or 12 units, it really varies, that there's a requirement that a certain percentage be affordable units. And that goes into the pro forma that developers put together for projects. It's can be a fairly controversial topic, but that is one mechanism that some communities use to ensure that affordable housing is being provided in a community. Have any of you had any experience with that or read about, been exposed to inclusionary housing?
No, I haven't.
I have not, Laura, but I did want to ask a question that I asked yesterday. And that was in regards to, so in looking at the requirements that each city has in that, there's not really any specific correlation regardless of city size or how many current dwellings they have, it looked like. So my question is, where does the city of Azusa fall in line with affordable housing with respect to the entire San Gabriel Valley? Is there anywhere that has that information, or at least a good guesstimate for that information?
We would have to look that up for you, Vice Chair Mendez, because I don't know readily if that information is available. You'd have to go to each city, although we could check with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments to see if that type of information is collected from its members, particularly since housing elements are front and center right now. And I'm sure that the Council of Government meetings are discussing housing. So we can ask the COG that question.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Vice Chair Wilshire will, you know, that we follow up so we get that information, because, you know, you do bring up a good point as where do we stand? And not only that, but I'm assuming most cities aren't as progressive when it comes to policies like that. So, you know, it's not only an Azusa issue, but a regional issue. And then, you know, if we end up becoming kind of the forefront and leading the charge, then, you know, because we are a hot commodity. I mean, we're the untapped city in the foothills in the sense where we still have our growth and everything to happen in the city.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, and I think what's important to take into consideration, of course, while we certainly want to adapt and ensure that we have housing available for all, I think it's important to take into consideration that there's other cities that aren't ignoring this segment of the population, and the city of Azusa itself is taking the burden. Not burden's not the right word, but they're not taking this direction for this specific demographic.
Yeah.
Just a point of interjection for a moment here. Steve Kester said his laptop battery is kaput, and he may have gone off screen here. Manny, I don't know if you have a way of getting a hold of him and letting him know he can call in on his phone. The Zoom number does allow for participating by phone if he would like.
Yeah, let me.
I can let him know, Manny.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mercedes. I'll put on the chairperson hat for a minute here, or actually, Councilmember Mendez, can you want to take over as vice chair and help lead the discussion while she's reaching out to Steve?
Sure, absolutely. I think she might just be texting him. I think.
Okay.
I think Mercedes knows Steve pretty well.
Yes, I did. I just texted him.
Okay, thank you. Then, all right, you get your chairmanship back then, Mercedes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I wanted to get on there before Andrew had a chance. So let's talk about how we're going to get this word out. What are we going to do? How are we going to get people to participate? How are we doing? What you should have a count, don't you, of how many people have taken this survey at this point?
Joey, do you happen to know how many people have taken the survey at this point? Joey's busy running the mural right now. Let's see if
I believe it was around 45 right now who have completed it. 45
people?
Mm-hmm.
Between Councilmember Avila, Mercedes, and I think we've shared it at least that many times.
That's crazy.
Manny, I know the city has shared it on their Facebook page at least once, maybe twice now. Is there a possibility that we can sponsor it, throw some money behind it, so that residents of the city see it on social media?
Yeah, so we do have raffle prizes, and I'm also going to be getting gift cards to local restaurants to include. I actually got a lunch pail. I got a tumbler that has the Azusa Housing for All logo on it. So I'm going to be putting it more on social media more aggressively. We're also going to be doing 2 story times with the Azusa City Library on specific housing books. And then that's another thing that I'm also going to be pushing out to the parents. We are going to be doing insert flyers for all of the Azusa City Library, like when they pick up books and stuff like that. And then the same for the seniors as far as the meals that they deliver to them. So that, and then once we go out to the communities and so forth, and the specially targeted focus groups, we're hoping that will be more in line.
And what about our cable station?
Yeah. So the video that you guys saw today, it was kind of debuted yesterday and today. That will be on the cable channel playing along with the link to the website. And then on the website itself, everything's on there where they can click for the survey, and they can sign up for updates and so forth.
Well, I'm disappointed. I thought for sure you were going to say 450, not 45.
You know what? I need to ask Nikki. I don't know what her magic was. I mean, she got 600 for that park survey. I mean, so
yeah, that was shared very similarly, which is rather interesting. Manny, do we have a good guesstimate as to what a good number would be, so that we're provided sufficient feedback?
Yeah, Laura, can you guys provide a little? I'm not sure what that ideal number would be for responding for people for the survey.
Let's see. I'm thinking of an example where we recently did a survey in Garden Grove, which has a population of about 75,000 people. And I think we got maybe 500 respondents and made a really big push using very similar methods, Manny, that Azusa's doing. Hold on, I was.
Hey, Laura, I can talk a little bit of context to that too.
Sure, I'll catch up with the chat if you cover that.
Yeah, I know for Monrovia, which is next door, we had I believe about 330 to 350 completed responses, and of those completed, and about 142 that were partial. So around 460, 65 total. And, that was a little bit longer of a survey. So I don't know if that had any impact on that, but I would say probably in the 200 to 500 range is where we'd be looking for a similar city.
Joey, I'm sorry, what did you say the total return of Monrovia?
Yeah, for total, it was around 460, but about 140 of those were just partial, so not fully completed.
Okay.
And Joey, how long has the Azusa survey been up?
I'm not sure of the exact date of launch off the top of my head.
I want to say it was last Thursday, maybe. Manny, does that sound right?
Yeah, so it's only been a week. Yeah. And I think that now if we can make a big push, because we've got another 3 weeks for the survey, Marcela Rodriguez has suggested the Azusa Light and Water listserv, ASUSD listserv, also Instagram.
Yeah, so so Light and Water, we had our last month where we were kind of launching it, and I put out the website and so forth. So I am following up with them to see if we can get another email blast out of their listserv that they have. And then the same with the LAUSD. I am reaching out to Lika from Azusa Unified School District and partnering up with them to push it out to their Peachtree, and also see if they have any existing parent groups that I can do presentations to, that hopefully they transition to virtual formats.
Are there any, what's the word I'm looking for, service provider groups, Manny or Dean, that the city keeps databases of?
We do have community connections that we've already reached out, and we got some emails from them and so forth. And we actually sent that out for yesterday's workshop, so hopefully for them to attend. We got some, but not, it wasn't the greatest response.
Okay.
Manny, you mentioned Mickey's results. Maybe we could get her email list. She probably got emails.
Yeah, we did send that out. It's just, parks are more fun than houses. I think it's
which is interesting, because housing affects us significantly more, I will argue.
Exactly.
So that is interesting. Okay, Manny, we also have the tech sign up that we've been pushing. Is there a way, and speaking specifically of a roster, if you will, of people who've opted into information? Is there a way we can utilize that system to?
I'll follow up with that. I know it's fairly new, and I just don't know. Yeah, like you mentioned, if there has some people that opted in for just regular information versus like emergency notifications.
So somebody did mention, and Joey captured it for APU. Certainly looking to reach out to faculty and staff at APU, because they're community members. Students maybe not so much more so, just because they come and go, but certainly people who have staying power in the community through APU would be.
Right, have students at APU, so that wouldn't be helpful. I don't even think they'll be back by the time we'll be done with the survey, but we certainly can reach out to staff and faculty.
Mm-hmm. If I can add 2 more to that list, the neighborhood homework house I think has good connections with parents, and that might be a possible solution, as does My Third Place.
Those are good suggestions, Andrew.
Sorry, Andrew, what was that second one?
My Third Place.
Thank you.
Isn't it my third grade place? Is it?
No, my third place.
Okay, got it.
That's with board member Greer, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Great. Very, very good suggestions all. And Joey, I think we didn't quite capture the Park and Rec department and the list that they used for the Park and Rec master plan.
Laura, is there anything else that we need to work on tonight?
No, I think Mercedes, if you would like to open the meeting up for public comment, just that would be great to see if there are people who are not on the committee who would like to react to what they've listened to this evening and can offer some ideas.
Great. So I will open up the meeting to public comment. If anybody has, any member of the public wishes to speak, could you raise your hand? And unmute yourself. I'm not seeing any hands. Are you?
I am not. I'm looking at microphone.
Marcella.
Marcella.
Hi all, good evening. I'm really excited to have joined. Thank you, Mr. De Anda, for inviting me. I just wanted to tell you I appreciate the time and the effort here. I'm a resident. I'm also an APU grad, so that's the reason I inserted that, so we don't all leave. Some of us do stay as well. But thank you for that. I'm really excited to see how this changes the community. Thanks for allowing me to participate.
Thank you for attending.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Marcella, before you get off, can you make one recommendation on how to get the word out for the survey and getting people excited about this program? Do you have a particular organization you're involved with that might be a good source?
Yeah, I'll definitely be sharing it. I live in the Azusa Vistamont condos near Azusa Greens, so I'll be sharing it with the HOA here, as well as some other residents that I know in nearby communities.
Great, thank you.
That's perfect. Thanks so much.
Let's see, any other hands up? Mercedes, you're a pro with this Zoom stuff. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no. I don't see any hands though.
No. I will let you either conclude the meeting if you'd like, or if there's any other business, Manny, that the committee needs to attend to this evening.
Can we talk about next steps? What's going to happen next?
Certainly. The most immediate next step is to really push the survey and to get the input from folks so that we can understand what the community's needs and ideas are. Most of what we're going to be doing over the next month, in addition to collecting this information, is to be doing the background research on, as I mentioned, the community needs, the constraints. And so we're going to be producing that information. The next community workshop is scheduled for March 30th. And we are going to be sharing a lot of the ideas with the community at that point in time. And we want to use the same list that we've developed for getting the word out to encourage people to participate in that workshop. And Manny, at this point, we do not have a date yet for the second committee meeting, do we?
Not yet. Once I get tentative dates from Genevieve, then I'll be emailing the committee, solidifying the date, and then at that point, publicizing it. So that will be happening sooner than later, just so I can have a lot of more publicizing time for the community. Okay.
And I think the charge that we would offer to the members of the committee and the audiences who are here this evening is to, get the word out, let people know that Manny and his staff are offering incentives for people to participate. And so, but more than anything, it's their community. I think the biggest incentive is the future of Azusa.
That's
and
correct.
For the needs of people who have moved away and want to come back to Azusa, or recent graduates of APU who've really embraced the community. So I think that's a pretty darn good incentive. Those are the next steps, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have anything else they wish to discuss?
Yes, Mercedes, just one quick question. Nico or Manny, is this on the agenda for the next council meeting? A discussion or an announcement, presentation of sorts?
Nico or Matt, if you guys can provide insight.
Hi, everyone. This is Nico, Deputy City Manager with the City of Azusa. It is not on the agenda. However, the City Manager could provide an update under his communications. As you know, Vice Chair, at this upcoming meeting on Monday, we also have an economic development update from Matt Marquez, our Economic and Community Development Director. But of course, going back to some of your points about how best to share this information with residents and make it as widely known as possible, I will say that this is pretty common for housing element updates and things that take a lot of visioning. These are plans that are going to involve a lot of conversations, and so in addition to everything that Manny has mentioned, we can also start crafting some press release materials and begin sharing that on a more regular basis at some of our public meetings.
Thank you, Nico. Appreciate it.
And Manny, you know, I thought of an untapped source too, is Citrus College. We need to reach out to Chris Garcia at Citrus College because we have a lot of Azusa kids that attend Citrus College.
Do you have a contact, Mercedes?
I'll get it for you.
All right, thank you.
Sure, no problem. Anything else? Hearing nothing, then I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 7:25.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. We appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.